Hello and welcome to a very special Halloween edition of your Haunting podcast. I'm your host Nick Tyler, the author of Haunted Yorkshire, and today we're going to be heading to the Brecon Beacons in Wales to look at a little farmhouse. Now, being located at the foot of the Brecon Beacons and given some privacy by a small row of trees in the front of it, it really is a peaceful and idyllic place to live on face value. However, many families over the years have experienced strange paranormal phenomena, and the one in particular we'll be looking at today is a family called the Rich family. Now, by all accounts, the Rich family enjoyed a truly magical first summer in 1989 in that farmhouse. However, as we move on towards autumn, that's when strange phenomena begins to happen, and it's the start of a harrowing tale that would last for 7 long years, ripping the family apart emotionally, putting them to the brink of financial disaster, and also resulting in the house being the location that has had the most exorcisms in the entire of the United Kingdom. This is the story of Heol Fanog, the witch house. So in May 1989, Bill Rich moved into Heol Fanog with his wife Liz and his son Lawrence from a previous marriage. Bill was an Englishman, he had dark hair and a beard, and he was a painter and sculptor by trade. His wife Liz was a Welsh woman, and she was tall with long blonde hair. Now, Liz and Lawrence hadn't actually known each other that long when Bill and Liz got married. They'd recently come back from a family holiday to Egypt where they'd used it as a bonding exercise, and by all accounts, Lawrence and Liz got on quite well. In fact, Liz recalls that she saw him more as a little brother rather than a stepson. Now, at the time they moved into Heol Fanog, Liz was 3 months pregnant with a boy that would be Bill and Liz's first child together. They were looking forward to moving into the house. Bill thought it was the perfect opportunity to work on his painting more, and Liz was looking forward to using the grounds to raise some livestock. Just to the rear of Heol Fanog was the ruins of an old manor house. The cellar was actually still wide open and filled with water, and it was a place that Lawrence, the young teenager, used to love exploring and walking around, but he was told to always be very careful in that area. So shortly after moving into Heol Fanog, Lawrence was out exploring the ruins of the manor behind the house, and Liz was out in the garden when she was startled by a man in the trees. It turned out to be a neighbouring farmer called Wyn Thomas, a man that, despite really not liking Englishmen, did strike up an unlikely friendship with Bill. It was Wyn Thomas that first planted the seed of something unusual around the house. He claimed that the ruins of the old manor was a strange place and that many livestock had drowned within that flooded cellar. Wyn Thomas will elaborate a little bit more on the ruins of the old manor house as we move further into this harrowing tale, but for now, their first summer truly was an idyllic one. So now we'll skip forward to November 1989, when the family first experienced something they might class as paranormal. Liz had given birth to her new baby, a young boy named Ben, and he slept in the room next to Bill and Liz in the nursery. Now, something that may or may not be significant is the fact that this was the night that Bill and Liz first had sex after having their new baby. As most new parents often do, they applauded each other for not waking the baby, and sod's law would have it, at that particular moment Ben woke up. So whilst Liz went to the nursery to sort out Ben, Bill went downstairs to the toilet to take a wee. Whilst using the toilet, Bill heard what he described as heavy boots running across the landing and down the stairs, stopping 2 steps from the bottom. Bill immediately rushed upstairs to Lawrence's bedroom to tell him to be quiet for fear of waking Ben up even more, only to find him sock on fast asleep. And then even more intriguingly, when he went to the nursery to speak to Liz, she claimed she'd not heard anything at all. Bill had somewhat of a restless night's sleep that evening, and the next morning at breakfast, Liz teased him that it might have been the Hag of the Mist, an old Welsh folklore tale, that a woman with scraggly grey hair, black eyes and black teeth, and big leathery wings would creep into the rooms of men at night screaming, my husband," before claiming them as her next victim. But as an envelope dropped through the letterbox that morning, the jokes were short-lived. The family received their first electric bill for the last quarter, expecting it to be somewhere within the region of £100 in 1989. They were absolutely astonished to look down and see a bill of £750. enough to power nearly 8 homes. Now, the electric bill could be seen as the second bit of strange phenomena experienced within the house, and it's certainly something that will play a pivotal role as we move forward. But Bill and Liz were literally just moments away from experiencing the third. Liz reassured Bill not to panic about the unusually large electric bill, saying it was clearly just a mistake and that they would phone the electric company, then called Swalek, later on to discuss it and have it re-evaluated. She then went upstairs to put Ben down for his nap, and that's where the third bit of phenomena starts to happen. Liz sat in the armchair beside the cot, the armchair that had been left in the house when they moved in by their landlord, Phil Holborn. As she softly sang a lullaby to the baby, she was interrupted by the booming sound of a door opening and slamming shut repeatedly over and over. Bill raced upstairs from the kitchen to see what was going on, only to find Liz as white as a sheet and holding the screaming baby in her arms. She claimed that while she could hear the sound coming from the door to the room, it remained latched and closed at all times. Now, over the next few days, the auditory phenomena of the disembodied footsteps, the heavy boots running along the landing and down the stairs, stopping just before the bottom that Bill experienced, has now begun to be experienced by the entire family. Liz, Bill and Lawrence have all heard the footsteps, although the footsteps now aren't alone. The family also claim to hear another set of disembodied footsteps, this one described as soft shuffling, almost like slippers moving along the landing. In addition to hearing footsteps, the family also seem to be experiencing what we call phantosmia, which is the sensation of smelling phantom smells. Now, very interestingly, the family claim to experience 2 different smells, very polar opposite of each other. Number 1 is a sulphuric kind of smell, something we would naturally associate with demons. But on the other hand, they're also smelling what they describe as incense, which is something that casts the mind more towards the Catholic Church and holiness. Now, the polar opposites of the phantom smells are very interesting alone, but when we also combine that with the different footsteps, the heavy boots as described by Bill and all the family sprinting along the landing and stopping before the bottom of the steps, and then the much slower, softer shuffling of slippers, it does make the mind wonder, are we dealing with more than one entity in this house? Potentially. Now, as the family all sit together in the kitchen listening to the phantom footsteps above them, Lawrence, the son, asks what the strange ticking and whirring sound is. And as the family become conscious of the sound, it's something that Bill then recognises. On the very first night that he went down to the toilet and heard the disembodied footsteps for the first time, he claims that he also heard that strange ticking and whirring sound. Bill, Liz and Lawrence then all worked together to try and trace the source of this strange noise. Now, to give you an idea of how the home's laid out, the kitchen leads into a very small hallway that leads up the stairs and onto the first floor. Now, at the side of the hallway, there's a door that takes you down a dark corridor into a barn that's built onto the house. The family traced the sound through the door and into the corridor where the electric meter is. The electric meter, whilst the footsteps are currently booming above them, is absolutely whizzing round, faster than physics could ever allow. The family are absolutely shocked to witness this, all 3 of them together looking on as it happens. But then the most intriguing thing is, as the footsteps above them stop, the electric meter instantaneously stops whirring round. Now, the electric phenomena at Heol Fanog is one of the most intriguing parts of what we might perceive to be evidence throughout the entire case. This is in no small part given the fact that it's black and white. We know for a fact that the house was given a £750 electric bill when it should have been closer to £100. We also know that the company, Swalek, that supplied the electricity, came out many times, did various different tests, checked for grounding, power surges, all different kinds of things, and every single time found 0 faults with the supply to the property. Now, to give you a little bit of background on the company Swalek, they weren't a fly-by-night group. They are now defunct, but they were sold and rebranded a couple of times, and they are still running now, but as part of the OVO energy and utilities company in the United Kingdom. Now, as the haunting of Heol Fanog became national news, which it eventually will do, Swaelec was obviously very reluctant to get involved in any paranormal suggestions with regards to the supply to the house. Instead, they said that because there'd been no faults found and they'd investigated it thoroughly, Bill and Liz Rich had to pay the bill that was outstanding. Now, to give you a little bit more context on this, a solicitor for Bill at the time said that if they ran every single appliance in that house 24 hours a day, it would not come close to the amount of money that Swaelec claimed that they'd used in electricity. Now, to put that into current terms in 2025, that would make their annual bill for you or me in the United Kingdom around £8,500 a year, which equates to a quarterly bill of around £2,125, or daily usage of close to £24 per day. So we really are talking eye-watering, astronomical amounts of money. As late November rolls into early December, the family are experiencing phenomena almost daily now, and it's really beginning to take its toll. It was around this time that Bill decided to go for a walk with the family's dog and Ben in his pushchair to clear his head when a tractor came towards him. The driver was the neighbouring farmer Wyn Thomas, who made some small chit-chat with Bill as he went about his walk with his child and dog. Bill must have really been feeling quite low at this point, and it was all getting on top of him, because he began slowly opening up to Wyn Thomas, asking him if he was aware of any strange happenings that had ever been mentioned before at Heol Fanog. It was now that Wyn Thomas told Bill a little bit more about the history of the house that he'd moved into. It told him that there was no good luck surrounding Heol Fanog, and that a few years ago, another farmer friend of Wyn's had gone up to the ruins of the old manor house to collect some stones to build a wall with. You will recall that the ruins of the original manor house were actually situated just behind Heol Fanog in the same grounds. Wyn claimed that the farmer, whilst collecting stone to build his wall with, discovered in the middle of the rubble a graveyard full of broken gravestones that had been picked up and leaned against the walls that were still intact. Wyn also told Bill that it wasn't unusual for old large manor houses and big estates to have their own private burial ground. However, they believed that someone had smashed up the gravestones and used them to build with. They'd taken the original stones from the ruins of the mansion, including the gravestones, to build the house that stood there now, Bill and Liz's new home, Heol Fanog. By now, the family are absolutely terrified, and they find themselves questioning over and over what the phenomenon could be, even discussing whether or not they're just going mad. They're living out in the sticks, they're living in the middle of nowhere. Bill in particular, he's from England, he's from the city, and it's a very new dynamic for him to be living in the Brecon Beacons. But they also recall that as they're actually talking about it, the footsteps manifest once again and come down the stairs, and they start to question whether or not this spirit can actually hear what they're saying, and that maybe it's interacting as they talk about it. In addition to the phenomena that the family have already experienced, they're also beginning to experience new phenomena in severe temperature fluctuations that seem very localized around the bottom of the stairs, the small hallway, and the door through to the corridor where the electric meter is, where everything seems centered. These again follow suit, very polar opposite of each other. One day it might be absolutely icy cold to the point where you can see your own breath, and then the next it'll be scorching hot, despite the fact that the furnace isn't on, it's the middle of winter. They even claim that they had to have the doors and windows open to try and cool down. So as we head into early 1991, we've reached a point where the family is well and truly terrified, but they're not entirely sure what they're terrified of. At the moment, at best, it just feels like there's a presence in the house. They feel like they're being watched. And in fact, Liz even recalls a conversation with Bill where he said he felt like he's walked into a village pub in a very small, close-knit village, and everyone turns to stare at him because he's an outsider, to the point he's never in his life ever felt so unwelcome. On top of all the fear and emotion that the family's feeling, they're also feeling immense financial pressure at this point. The electric company Swalek is refusing to budge on the bill that they were sent a couple of months ago for £750, and in just another month's time they'll be due another bill on top of that one as well. To make things even worse, Bill had some contracts in the West Country to send some sculptures and paintings over, but the companies who were dealing with all cancelled their orders. Liz even remembers that fateful conversation, saying that Bill said it was almost as if they didn't know why they were cancelling, insinuating she believes that the house had cursed them with immense bad luck. Now, after moving into Heol Fanog, Bill and Liz had started somewhat of a small holding, as was always Liz's dream. But as we're about to discover, even the animals weren't safe from the strange happenings in the house. Bill returned home one afternoon to find Ben crying. He shouted for Liz, assuming the boy was hungry. But Liz wasn't in the house. Suddenly, he heard a screaming from outside. She was bleeding, saying that her prized pet pig Lucinda had turned and tried to kill her. Passing by, Farmer Wyn Thomas heard the commotion and came to help the couple. After a few choice words saying that townsfolk shouldn't play at being farmers, he ordered Liz into the house before shooting the pig dead. Now, Lucinda had originally been bought for meat, as is the way in most small holdings. However, Liz had really took a shine to the pig, fell in love with it almost. It became an absolute pet to her. And by all accounts, the feeling was reciprocated by the pig. Liz says that it would come when called. If she scratched its tummy, it would roll over. It was essentially a gigantic dog to her. So what could possibly have made the pig attack her all of a sudden and out of the blue? Could it have been something natural, or maybe something paranormal? Now, as an isolated incident, we can't really look too much into a pig attack as what we might determine as evidence. However, this was not an isolated incident. Within just a few short weeks, most of the animals were either turning feral and running away or dying inexplicably. Liz claims during that period, a dog died, 2 cats died, a guinea pig died, and 6 goats died. So it's now been around 5 months since the phenomena originally started in the toilet that night when Bill heard it, and it seems to be happening pretty much on a daily basis. The family have experienced polarising phantom smells, 2 sets of disembodied footsteps, the heavy clunking boots and the soft slippers. We've also had the severe temperature fluctuations, one going hot, one going cold, the inexplicable animal deaths, the nursery door slamming and shutting, seemingly without actually moving, and then of course the serious malfunction with the electric meter. But other than the creepy story Farmer Wyn Thomas told Bill about the stones from the old manor being used to build the current house, everything's only been experienced by the family inside. And in terms of parapsychological explanations, that does raise a few concerns. The first and foremost would be a condition called contagion. The easiest way to describe this, if you've ever been in a situation where you're supposed to feel fear, such as a scare maze or something like that, and someone at the side of you screams and then you also scream, or vice versa, they are suffering from contagion. They don't see or feel what you're actually screaming at, but they're feeding off of your fear. This is something that not only humans but other animals have evolved to do that could potentially at one time or another have saved your life. So is it possible that when Bill heard the footsteps, it planted a seed in Lawrence and Liz, and then they started to create feelings of fear inside the self, which ultimately resulted in something we called social dissonance, which is where you start to see only what you want to see and disregard things that don't really fit the narrative to your tale. Now, while there were no death warnings at the time to say there was any diseases or anything that could be transmitted between different animals, that's not to say that something didn't happen to get the animals sick. But given the fact that they felt like they're in a paranormal situation, they might be adding a paranormal twist onto that. So what we'd really be hoping for now is for a third party to enter the story and either tell of previous experience or experience something brand new in the house that would fit and corroborate with the evidence that we've already got in front of us. And thankfully, that's exactly what's about to happen. So the Rich family have now lived with the phenomena going off in the house for around a year. But at this point, it switches from an auditory phenomena to a visual one. They called the local plumber because the toilet had lifted off the ground around 6 inches, taking the tiles up with it, almost as if there was a build-up of pressure underneath pushing it upwards. But when the plumber arrived, the toilet was fine, no damage and in perfect working order. Bill and Liz were bewildered by this, but after about 30 minutes, the phenomena happened again, and they called the plumber to come back, who did, but once again, it was completely fine with no damage whatsoever. Liz breaks down in tears in front of the plumber, swearing that they are not liars. But here's where it gets really interesting. The plumber actually believes them, and the reason he believes them is that he says this is not the first time he's worked at Heol Fanog. He tells them that over 20 years ago he was employed by the house's current owner to fit a new boiler and central heating system. One afternoon he had to go to Brecon to pick up some supplies and told his apprentice to stay behind and finish off the work. The apprentice flat refused. He was terrified to be in that house alone. He said that he always felt as if someone was watching him. The plumber said he didn't believe in anything superstitious, but the sheer look of terror on his face was the same look as the one that Liz had on hers right now. Both the plumber and the apprentice finished the work and left the job. But then it got even weirder. That night, the owner, Mrs. Marion Holborn, rung the plumber to say that all the radiators had been wrenched off of the wall. Now, the plumber was a professional tradesman and took a great deal of pride in what he did. He figured there was absolutely no way that the radiators had come off the wall unless someone had took them off. Nonetheless, he went back to the house and reattached them all, thinking nothing else of it. The next day, he got another phone call off Marion Holborn, saying that the radiators, once again, had been ripped from the wall. He said he was absolutely bewildered by what was happening and even questioned if the old lady had done it herself, but there was no way she'd be strong enough to carry out that amount of work. So he went back up, this time checking not once, not twice, but 3 times. There were no way them radiators were coming back off the wall. But of course, you guessed it, the next day Mrs. Marion Holborn phoned him up to say they were back off the walls. By now, the plumber was at his wit's end. Like I said before, he wasn't a superstitious man, but he did have the feeling that it was a bit of a strange house. He didn't know what else to do. So, he went to the local hardware store and bought what he calls crucifix screws. They're what I would call a Phillips. They're the screws with the little crosses on the top. It was literally the only thing he could think of. And lo and behold, that was the last time Mrs. Marion Holborn ever called the plumber to go back and reattach the radiators. Liz was in a weird way thrilled to hear the story. It felt like she might not be going mad after all. She was so happy in fact that she rushed over to the radiator, and there, fixing it to the wall, was the same screws that he said he'd fitted 25 years before. So now to some degree we do have some corroborated evidence. It's no longer just the family with inexperience in it. The plumber, a third party, has come in and also experienced something strange at Heol Fanog, plus Mrs. Marion Holborn herself. Now, research has shown that Marion Holborn lived in the house and actually owned it before she died, passing it on to her son. Her son, Phil Holborn, rented the house out to a lady named Bridget before she moved out, and Phil Holborn then rented it to the Rich family. Now, Marion Holborn was something of a big deal in Brecon. She was a landowner, she had a lot of money behind her, she lived in a nice big house, and Brecon itself is a very small area. So we kind of start to get the sense that maybe the villagers at the time know more about Heol Fanog than they perhaps were letting off when Bill, Rich and Lawrence first moved in. So we are now at late February 1991, and the smells, the disembodied footsteps, the doors opening and slamming shut, all pale in comparison to what happens next, as finally, after almost a year, what hides in the shadows finally steps forward. Liz returned to the house after taking a walk with Ben, and as she walked down the driveway, she had the immense feeling that someone was watching her. But as she looked up towards the nursery window, she let out an almighty scream. Standing in the window looking straight back down at Liz was an old lady with grey hair and a cardigan. Whatever had been hiding in the darkness had finally stepped forward. Join us next time for part 2, as the haunting is just getting started.